Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan Roth, the Motor City Madmouth. And tonight, best meets best. What I mean by that is a guy that helped me get into the business, George Eichorn, is on for his annual Monday night appearance. And, of course, the best baseball analyst and one of the best friends I have, Mark Littell, is alongside of him tonight. Guy, glad to have you together.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
All right, well, let's talk about some Detroit memories. Mark, you were talking to George in pre-production about Tiger Stadium. You pitching there quite a bit.
Yeah, actually, I have, and I like Tiger Stadium. I like the old stadiums quite a bit. Obviously, the nostalgia, and especially when Fidrich was there, they filled it, and that's pretty neat. Other times it was half full, but when Fidrich came around and he was patting the rubber and the mound out and everything and talking to the ball, everybody got into a roll. And so, it all worked out well. And I'll never forget after that one game that Fidrich pitched, I actually got into the game and I got taken out. We had a lead and then we lost the lead. But if you remember, you guys probably know this, the visiting clubhouse door was over on the right field clubhouse, over on right field. It was just a door. I mean, it didn't say visiting clubhouse or anything because, the fans, and everything, but it was just a door. But the guys that were getting the autographs were always out hanging around after the game, there's 30, 40, 50 of them. And, I remember this game in particular when Fidrich was pitching because it was crowded that, apparently somebody had gotten on the top of the fence at the top in right field and climbed it or something, and he ended up falling off about 5 minutes before I got outside that door after I had taken a shower, and I was on my way to Lindell's AC that night.
Yeah, Mark Fidrich.
Oh boy.
Yeah, Mark Fidrich.
Yeah. Those were cramped quarters. I remember, Mark. Yeah, especially for the visiting team. Tigers clubhouse was a little bit bigger, obviously, but for the visitors clubhouse, you guys were really cramped in there. And boy, you bring back great memories. And Scott, you and I know the Bird, and what a magical year, 1976, especially when he just lit up the baseball world. He got 19 wins, American League Rookie of the Year. He pitched in the All-Star game in Philadelphia that year and went up to President Ford as President Ford was shaking hands of the All-Stars before the game at Veterans Stadium. And he said, "Who might you be, sir?" To Gerald Ford, President of the United States. "Who might you be, sir?"
Yeah, Mark.
Well, that was Fidrich to the T right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Fidrich was definitely a classic for sure. I mean, you think about what he did for ABC Monday Night Baseball, and for a team that was a sub-500 team, Mark Fidrich was the best thing that happened to that town, let alone that year in 76. I think they had 3 All-Stars, right? Wasn't one of them Ron LaFleur, I believe? Right. The other one was Mark Fidrich and Rusty Staub, if I remember right.
Possibly. I know he must.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But
you're right, Scott. I mean, that was memorable. I think Euchre was in town.
Yeah.
Working one of the games on the Monday Night Baseball crew with God, I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Coach Bell.
Well, of all things, Bob Gibson might have been in town that night as a color commentator. Of all things, because I mean that's kind of interesting that Gibson came down to our clubhouse, and I grew up as a Cardinal fan because I'm from the state of Missouri. I played for both the Royals and the Cardinals, and Gibson shows up in the clubhouse. I'm going, good grief, there's Bob Gibson right there, and I shook his hand. He said, "Hey, you threw the ball pretty well tonight." And I said, "Yeah, thank you." Thanks, whatever. So.
Bob Gibson. Well,
Scott and I were there, Mark, for the very last game at Tiger Stadium. And Scott, I know it'll be one of our most memorable times when Ernie Harwell and others, Gal Kaline and Willie Horton and Gibson and all those guys, they took their final lap to their positions, Mark. It's just an unbelievable thing, the last game. Ever at Tiger Stadium. Remember, Scott, in 1999?
Yeah, I often ride you, though, George. I kept telling you I never had a chance to get into Tiger's clubhouse, but you had to leave early. And I said, why couldn't you have stayed just a little bit longer? But you know what? If that's the biggest problem I've ever had, so be it. So, Mark, let's talk about the Lindell AC. You enjoyed that as a hangout, didn't you?
I think we all did, actually. Lindell AC was the place to go for a beer and a great burger and good fries. And, there was never a dull moment. I mentioned to George earlier on that George, Brett, and we'd signed the same year, and we'd hung out. And he said, George said, hey, Diaz, he called me Diaz. He said, hey, Diaz, well, let's go down to AC and get a burger and a beer. I said, hey, it's great, let's go. So, we got a cab real quick, went down to AC right there, Lindell's. We were getting ready to walk through the door, and somebody's going out there yelling. They're saying, get out of the way, get out of the way. And so George and I just kind of back up. He says, fight, fight, fight. And we're just watching. We're expecting 2 or 3 big guys to come out. There's these 2 girls coming out, grabbing each other's hair, killing each other. And it was just Katie bar the door, here we come. And so they kicked them out, and we got in. And the one thing about Lindell's AC is they had a place for the ball players to hang out. And I remember the one night I was there, we got froze out of a game in Detroit opening night, matter of fact, of the season, first opening game. And they were playing the Sixers. And Julius Erving and a bunch of his guys came in. We were all drinking beer, and they were drinking, Coca-Cola or something, over there, and Pepsi and stuff. They were drinking beer. But we were all placed in a place where just the athletes could go. And Fidrich was in there that night because he just pitched. And he'd say, how you guys doing, man? Isn't this great? And of course, being typical Mark Fidrich, off the cup. And of course he's patting them out and things that night, all night. And he was, I don't know what he was patting that night, but he was ready for Lindell's AC. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that was a great place, Mark. And just those of our listeners that aren't familiar with it, it was several blocks, maybe about 3/4 of a mile from the stadium. But a lot of fans would go there, like you said, either before or after the game. The players would go after the game. Sometimes the Tigers went there, or the visiting team, as you mentioned, and Johnny Boutsikaris from Greece. 2 brothers owned the place. They loved it, and it had so much atmosphere there, like you just described. And I guess Billy Martin had one of his famous fights there in the alley with a guy named Boswell, the pitcher Boswell.
Yeah, well, I mentioned when Billy fights, he doesn't hit your face on. He sucker punches the hell out of you. I'm sure Boswell was turned away, and he sucker punched the crap out of him. So, but Billy got in his 2 swings, and I won the fight. Well, okay, that's good, Billy. That's good, Billy. And of course, Billy's had the crap kicked out of him so many times. It's not even mentionable. That Billy was he was drawn to the fists of fury, you might say, for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing about, and of course everybody knows what ended up happening with Billy and George Steinman. That would be way down the road for sure. So, all right, let's move this bad boy up. Although I should say the Sports Exchange, Mark, came from George and I, and here we are carrying it here in the year 2020. So how about that? How Back to the Future indeed is a part of what George and I do. Of course, Mark's been on numerous Sports Exchange with different co-hosts. We like to move them around, the co-hosts for sure. So with that said, let's move and speed the clock up and talk about COVID-19, shall we? Mark and I, this is probably an old topic. We're all too tired of hearing about it, but the numbers just don't seem to be going anywhere. We'll start with the fact that the Miami Marlins saw 21 people in the organization test positive. The team shut down operations July 26th. And I was on a Zoom call today with Derek Jeter, and his team was getting together, not wearing face masks in Atlanta. And as it turns out, they got relaxed and they let their guard down. What is your interpretation about the fact that the Miami Marlins are just the first of the humble pie that's about to hit MLB?
Well, the mighty Redbird Cardinals are not too far behind because they've got a few.
13.
First, it started out with coaches, and now it's graduated to several, if not many, players now. So they had to cancel the games, obviously, there in Detroit,
right?
And they're out right now. So it's kind of like, who knows? And I think a lot of the fans, because I'm on a lot of Facebook sites of different clubs as well, and the fans are blaming it on the manager, and that's hard to do because, well, the manager didn't keep them separated or this or that. Well, it's hard to do that because if you're in a locker room, everybody's there, even if you're 6 feet away, whatever they've got going, you've got showers, you've got the locker room, you've got, all kinds of oxygenated, tainted breath going around. It's not like they're kissing everybody, but they go down to the bench, and it's hard to keep everybody 6 feet away. And some guys are wearing masks, some aren't. But when you're running hot and heavy as an athlete, with your lungs and your heart's pumping, I can see this actually graduating pretty easily, actually, to almost any club. Not just the Cardinals, the Marlins, and I'm sure there's other clubs that have obviously tested positive on the high end as well. If not, they're getting ready to.
Yeah, that number, now that you brought it up, Mark, his hit 13, and as I understand, the Cardinals remain in Milwaukee. Obviously, that series, as you said, was postponed. And a couple of Cardinals, when I heard, actually visited a casino. They don't have a specific amount on that. But the casino's certainly not the right place for anybody to be at this stage.
No.
Is it? Casinos?
No, well, and it's very unfortunate because the situation is so fluid right now. I mean, games being canceled, trips being postponed, teams acting like what some of these series, in the middle of the series, you have to swap the home team and the visiting team. Right. Because of makeups and stuff like that. And I just wonder, Mark and Scott, how long is Commissioner Manfred going to go on with that? I mean, is this, now he's got two big teams, the Marlins and the Cardinals, that are snake, so to speak. I mean, is this going to be the rest of the way, the course of the season, or do you come to a point where you say enough is enough already?
Well, if you look at it, it's not even in a spring training mode because in spring training, you've at least got your games scheduled, for that time frame. And I think the whole scenario is obviously to have a season. And so when it's interrupted like this at these intervals, it's pretty hard to come out there and say, well, we're going to, go off of the team's the ratio of wins and losses and all the other things that they compute into this. But when you have teams down like this at this time and they're sitting for 4, 5, 6, 7 days and then they're starting back up, that's hard to go. When some teams have been playing, like the Dodgers have been playing, and the Astros have been playing, and the Yankees and Boston have been playing, I noticed. And you can just track the whole lineup right there of these major league clubs, the ones that are playing, the ones that are not playing, and it's hard to to get your skills going and your tools going all at once back again. It's very hard. So
yeah, well,
it's almost like 4A baseball.
Yeah, right.
You haven't got 3A baseball, you haven't got Major League Baseball, but you got 4A baseball in a sense.
Yeah, Rob Manfred's in a no-win situation. So I know, Mark and George, hindsight's 2020. We know that the current situation isn't working out well, but let's just have a little fun with this anyhow. We know the NHL and the NBA are in bubble scenarios. I realize Arizona and Florida were hot spots. I get that, okay? But don't you think, and again, it's only hypothetical at this point, that they would have been better off staying in their spring training facilities, despite the fact that they were going to be hot spots, and stayed in Florida, less air travel, stay in the hotel, go back to the hotel, versus what we currently have now?
Well, sure, why not? It just sweats it out of them.
Right.
Arizona's got 115 to 1,800 degree heat right now, and it's no fun, playing in Florida with all the humidity that they've got packed onto the 95 degree heat down there. And you'll just sweat it out of the players, and COVID won't exist. So I don't know.
No, I know. It's just I bannered around about this. When you've had 9 million shows addressing something like this, might as well bring it up to you guys. It's the first time you're hearing it together. Where you have Florida and the Grapefruit League, but at least everybody's in their spring training facilities. You avert the plane rides, and you're in your hotel for a while.
That's true. Yeah.
So there's familiarity if for no other reason. Go ahead, George.
I was just going to add that they floated that idea. Remember, Mark and Scott?
Yes.
They floated that idea of staying in those locations, but I'm not quite sure I understand why they just abandoned it. But again, there were a lot of ideas floated at the time when Anthony and Clark were locking horns on trying to get this season underway.
I think a lot of it had to do with the players and their families, and because if you look at Arizona and both Florida are very high COVID states, at the time right now. But still, if you isolate those teams, it's not too fun. But hey, it's baseball. That's the way it's supposed to be. You're under contract to play 60 games. I mean, military goes out and they go out for 2, 3, 4 months or half a year or a year to do their thing. Why can't you just go out for 2 to 3 months here and do your thing? And you can still see your families, in those cities. It's just that you have to be, it's very precautionary to what's going on. And but that's the business of baseball.
Yeah,
it's the business of sport. The players have to live up to their end. And, you look at Trout. Trout had his kid, and then he says, well, I'm coming back on Monday. Well, the Angels haven't been doing too well. They're still short of pitching, so what? That's always been their problem. But he's coming back, and you wonder now if he's going to or not because of, what happened with the Cardinals and, which might escalate with other teams, out there to down the line here. What might happen? So,
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, George.
No, I was just going to say it is a tough situation that Manfred is in. And like you said, Scott, a no-win situation. And I know he's thinking about the TV revenue. He's got ESPN and Fox and Turner Sports to please. Obviously, they want to get as many games as they can on television, both the regular season and the postseason. And but I think you just get to a point if this stuff continues that it's just you're making a mockery of even what he tried to piece together. If this outbreak continues, and whether it's the players' fault or whether it's their families that are involved. You don't know the situations, but these outbreaks are not good. Obviously, they've tried to do what they can with the travel arrangements and housing arrangements when they visit teams out of town, but obviously something's going wrong here. It's just not working for some of the players or some of the coaches that are involved or staff members because, like we said, with Miami and St. Louis especially outbreak, there could be more to follow.
Yeah,
that's right.
And amazingly enough, during the offseason, we were talking about too much money talk and not enough planning. Right, Mark? How many times have we talked about it? 1 minute it's this amount of games. Next minute it's this amount of games. Geez, folks, we can't even get through. One team's only played 3 games, and the other one, they've all played an odd amount of games. So what does it matter how many games you play? Nobody can even get on 10 games within the first 7 to 10 days of the season.
Well, it's cost prohibitive, actually, to Major League Baseball to let it continue because, the advertising or what they got tried to get lined up through their sponsors, ESPN, Major League Baseball, the networking, the whole 9 yards right there, the radio. It's all tough, but when these guys can't play well, and the advertisers say, well, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So it's cost prohibitive to sit out there and try to play baseball as it should be, and no fans to boot.
Well, like you guys said, you talk about Fox Sports, ESPN, Turner Sports. They get their TV money. That's the only way that they're able to make anything to begin with. But at what point or another, like you said,
right?
Do you wonder about how long this thing could go? I went online record last week and didn't feel that the season would really make it past August 9th, so that would probably make it, what was it, next Sunday. The right word going. I don't know how close or accurate that is.
Well, the unique thing is we have the Little League World Series to look forward to.
That's true. We had.
Of course, that's all. When you're a Major League Baseball player, you can bank on this. We love to watch the Little League World Series. Everybody in the clubhouse, when that thing comes on, we're glued into the set.
Do you really like the Little League World Series? I'll pitch you guys.
We love it. We love it.
Wow.
Why is this little kid throwing a curveball 15 of them in a row? Why is this guy so big? Is he on roids? Why is this little 12-year-old so big?
Yeah,
we love the series, man. We can make fun of them. It's so fun to watch those, throw an array of curveballs and the coach come out there and not know what to say. Well, you got to throw strikes, kid. And no kid. The guy wants to slap the coach. He said, the kid's smart. He says, yeah, no kid. You think I'm trying to walk the ballpark here? Crazy.
Well, amazingly enough, the Miami Marlins, and I do sit on their Zoom calls a lot, had 18 players, and of course we talked about 21, including staff and coaches. How do you replace that many players midway through this whole thing? I know they made several transactions in the last 7 to 10 days since they were shut down to 26, and they ended up getting some experienced pitching through it all rather than having to rely on youngsters. They probably made more transactions in a 7 to 10 day period than most teams would make during an off season. But when you're definitely snake pitting in the middle, what do you left to do?
Yeah, it's a hard one because you've got all these players down at the minor league level. I say the minor league, but you got them on that 60-man roster, and you can find pitching. But once again, you're not getting major league pitching or major league hitting sometimes. And those players who are out with the COVID at the time, obviously they're out for at least 14 days until they take another test. And, but the thing is, they've been off for 14 days. What's going to keep them in shape? What's going to keep them, are they seeing a ball throwing or is the pitcher, throwing a ball to a mitt, with a hitter in it? And are they going to be as sharp? Sure, those pitchers that everybody counts on, so-and-so is going to be pitching, Verlander's going to be pitching. Well, he's hurt right now, but let's just say he has COVID. Any of these guys have COVID. They still have to come back. They still have to, to be sharp, they have to throw a little bit daily. And that's part of the whole regimen of being a professional athlete. You look at the 162, we're looking at 60. We're not looking at 162 to where, and they're missing this amount of time on this short notice. So, I think the fans probably think that the players should just step in and pick up where they left off. That's not true. That's not true. And you're acceptable. You're more acceptable to injury at that time because you're not stretched out enough right there to let it really go. But you're letting it go, and all of a sudden you have a twinge, and you're in Tommy John, or you got some kind of a shoulder thing going on. I mean, am I right there, George?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's just not something you can snap your finger, like you said, Mark, and get back into playing condition, because it certainly takes a lot out of you. Even those that are just sick, maybe they're fatigued, or maybe they don't have COVID real seriously, but they're just achy or fatigued. And like you said, it's very difficult for somebody to come back on the field. And I agree with you, Scott. I mean, obviously Derek Jeter and the Marlins are trying to piece together who they can. And thank goodness you do have a 16-man roster. And of course, he's scanning the waiver wires and things like that, of course. But all that being said, it's very difficult and extremely challenging for Mattingly and other managers like him to try to piece together a lineup of guys that are either coming off of it or coming up from the minors or whatever the case may be. It's not a good professional product you're putting on the field like you expect it to, like you said, Mark, for the 60-game season.
Well, heck, George, Mattingly might have just started activating himself.
Hey, he couldn't have done that better. He's actually been asked that question, Mark, now that you brought that up. He said, yeah, I think back injuries derailed his career. But I did ask him a question to that effect. And I asked him, how are you able to get so much information on these guys that you're bringing in on the fly? So that's pretty easy. Number one, he knows a lot of the guys that he probably had in the past. Two, they get reports from analytics. And two, you can also find information on them, not only through paper, through video. So I guess you can get familiar with the guy fairly quickly with the technology that we definitely have going for sure today.
Exactly.
Especially doing it really on the fly.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I'm sure he can still. I'm sure Mattingly can still swing the bat like Williams could do the same thing. You know, when he was a manager, everybody was amazed when he was taking batting practice, and you know, he was squaring the ball up pretty well for that one time. Everybody was watching him take batting practice when he was managing the Senators. So,
Ed Williams, and then he had a stint with the Texas Rangers, of course, after the Senators moved down to Texas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
But the Tigers, what do you think about the Tigers situation, Mark? I mean, they fell back to 5-5, but the fans here were pretty excited. They got off to a 5-3 start. Cincinnati won both games of the doubleheader on Sunday, but Gardenhire has shown a little bit of life. The problem again is they just can't get solid hitting. They've had a lot of home runs, but they haven't made much else. Your thoughts about the Tigers?
Well, you know, they're in it's a club that's in the works, you know, where they've got some young guys with some older guys, and they're trying to get the right mix out there. And, you know, the biggest thing, too, is you sit there and you look at now is your pitching. And a lot of people sit there and they look at hitting, but you also have to look at your pitching. I know the Cardinals are pretty much stacked with pitching, but with the COVID thing, I don't know who took the hit on the COVID pitching wise, but they've been known to have, you know, pretty good pitching. And without that pitching, the Tigers the same way. If they don't have that, it's really going to hurt them. I think the Tigers, they've been so bad over the last 3 or 4 years here. You know, it's like the Royals. They're due to sit there and creep forward. You know, the Royals are a little bit behind the Tigers right now. I mean, of course, you've had new ownership over with the Royals. And I think that's it's a very, very good deal to have that new ownership that they have. They're really baseball people. They're very baseball-oriented people. And they're also Kansas City-oriented. They're Kansas City people that own that club. And they're excited. And Kansas City is excited. I mean, they're 3-7. Matheny's the new manager. He's been dealt what he's got. Of course, he got fired from the Cardinals, and then you're bringing the club along. It's the same thing with Detroit. You know, you've got young players, you got old players, you got the mix, and you're trying to find, you know, the happy hunting ground right there to where they can go forward.
Yeah, very true. Very good point and observation too. And Rod Gardenhire too is on his last year as manager. They've given no indication whether they're going to extend him at all beyond this season. And General Manager Al Avila hasn't said anything about it. Rod doesn't seem to care. I mean, he's obviously probably managing his last team anyways. And I think if he has to ride into the sunset, he will. But again, I compare him to Ralph Houck. Remember those young Tiger teams like we talked about earlier, when Ralph Houck was the veteran guiding those youngsters coming in and breaking in. Very important. I think Gardenhire has done the same thing with these young Tigers. Although a lot of the big stars of the future haven't been called up yet, such as Casey Mize and Matt Manning and Screwball and all those guys. But I like the fact that you got a veteran like Gardenhire leading the team, much like the Tigers back in the 70s had Ralph Houck.
Right. Well, Gardenhire, he's a no-nonsense type guy, and he's that kind of a player as well. And you know, he goes with the flow, which is good. He's not overbearing, but he lays the law, and that's what you need with a young club like the Tigers is somebody in that on that top step. So it's a big deal right there to have him now.
And funny how you mentioned Ralph Houck, George and Mark, because years ago when Ralph Houck was managing the Boston Red Sox, I got to talk to Ralph Houck, and he said to me about the Tigers job that was a tougher job than I thought it was. But, you know, I think Ralph Houck really was one of those kinds of guys that really enjoyed the challenge, because very few people realize that Ralph Houck was a pretty good, solid manager for the New York Yankees as well.
Right.
Before he took on the Detroit job.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jim Campbell went out and got him, and obviously he couldn't work his match because winning a championship in Detroit, but he laid the foundation, like with kids like Trammell and Whitaker, and those guys were coming in, Jack Morris, and so I think that Ralph deserves more credit. Of course, Sparky Anderson got the credit. We know that. I mean, he won the championship in Cincinnati and Detroit, so that goes without saying. But guys like Ralph Houck that worked in the background, laying foundation for that franchise. But yeah, you're right. It's interesting that. And by the way, I don't know if this story is true, but one of my sportscasting friends in Detroit said that a sportscaster, Scott and Mark, went up to Ralph Houck and Dick Trzaskowski. They were eating at a famous place in Detroit called the Carl's Chop House. And they were eating dinner, and a veteran sportscaster, and I know you know this name, Scott, Vince Doyle, had the nerve to go up to Ralph Houck while he was eating dinner with Coach Dick Trzaskowski and asked him a question about why he took a pitcher out of the game. Ralph Houck eventually got so mad, he took and he threw plates off his table and said, "How dare you come up to me, Vince Doyle, and ask me a question like that? You have no business questioning me right now when I'm having dinner with my coach, Trzaskowski."
Hey, really?
There you go.
Wow.
So there's a fiery side that I never knew to Ralph Houck. We talked about Billy Martin earlier, but I sure learned a lot, if that's a true story, about what Ralph Houck did when a broadcaster here in Detroit approached him after a tough loss.
Well, don't do it at a restaurant, for crying out loud. That thing called a clubhouse, if Vince was ever allowed in there, that's when you do it. Don't ruin the man's steak or whatever he was eating.
Exactly. His steak dinner was ruined.
Really? Don't mess with the steak, for crying out loud. Go into that smelly clubhouse and office.
You're talking about a manager that's going through a little bit of a rough time in a sense right now. Was it Kapler? Out at San Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Kapler.
Yeah. Well, Kapler came out of Philly. He made some mistakes with pitching last year. He thought he would have learned. Okay, let the pitching coach, chime in. So he goes out the other night. He goes out to the mound at the wrong time because he didn't know the new rules. And apparently he didn't talk to his pitching coach, or the pitching coach didn't speak up, or he's got enough control over the pitching coach to tell him to shut up, I'm making my own decisions here. Well, he got burned, and they ended up losing the ball game because of that. So, he caught hell from the press, which was an easy catch, actually. And that's the new thing with all these new rules you got coming out there. You got to include your coaches, and I don't think Kapler's learned yet. I said, good grief, haven't you learned from Philly? My gosh. And you got a little bit of divisiveness. You can go a little bit further with the BLM, and then you can look at the guy that stood up for the national anthem, the pitcher that stood up. Of course, he came in late. He says, well, I stood up for the national anthem, because I'm a Christian, which is fine. And, I'm the same way there too. But then he said, well, I'm not so sure about the BLM. And, of course, Major League Baseball's taking a big hit on that. But you might not want to talk about that, but it's there, folks.
Right.
And, but, you can either go there or not. And I've seen that so much on Facebook in the last 3 days, that it's amazing. Of course, people say they're going to quit watching this and that. And then the NHL the other day, they were the only ones that stood full time, for the national anthem. And everybody said, well, I'm switching to the NHL. So I'm dumping MLB, NBA, NHL, but I'm going to watch the NHL. Well, next they're going to be watching horse racing and Tutti Frutti and soccer. So whatever else.
That is fun.
Yeah, it's. I just wish we could move past this. And I mean, I know it's a worthy cause for a lot of people, and but this business about having everybody go along or everybody do this is just a little bit over the top for me as well. So I hope we can move on from that. I hope we can just continue with the American national anthem and the Canadian when we play Toronto or something like that. But it's been a crazy year, hasn't it, guys? 2020 year.
Oh yeah. So
I I told a story in my book, and I put it up the other day on Facebook. Just a little bitty excerpt about when I was in Australia coaching. The very first time I was over there, I was in Perth for 2 years. I was in Brisbane for 2 years, and Perth is the furthest American consulate from Washington. So the Australian team, I was the coach in resident on their bicentennial year, their 200th year of being a country, Australia. So I was over there in Perth. That afternoon, I was invited for the lunch to eat with the Toshiba Japanese team. And so I went over there and got some nice sushi, and then I had some that I went, well, maybe not again, but anyway. So the game went on, and I was wearing the Australian uniform, but here's what I saw. Not two national anthems like when we play up in Canada or vice versa, when we play the American and the Canadian, but they played the Australian national anthem, which was, Queen's English, music kind of, and then the national anthem of Japan, which was symbols. And then, of course, I was sitting there not expecting anything, and because I was on that line, they played our national anthem. And I actually dropped a tear because I'd been actually there so long, and to hear the national anthem played and how strong it sounded. And my father had fought in the Korean War and got shot up pretty good, and I was over in that neck of the woods on the Pacific Rim, and to hear the national anthem, and how bold it was, I really. It just really, took me by surprise, actually. So, interesting.
Yeah, all right, so let's...
Very nice story you shared, Mark. Thank you.
Oh, don't worry. He's filled with a lot of them. I love hearing them all the time. So, we know about all the different weird rule changes anyhow. So, let's talk about the 7-inning doubleheaders, which are a creation of COVID-19. And there's a two-part question here. What are your thoughts about the 7-inning doubleheaders, Mark?
Well, that's club ball, for one. Club ball is amateur ball. And if you have college ball, you have a 9 and a 7 instead of a 7 and 7. At least you have a 9 and a 7. So why not have the 9 and 9 like you're supposed to, but a 7 and 7? So if you have a 9 and a 7, if 7 and 7, are they getting pizza in between, or are they getting something else from the moms? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, when I first heard about it, I thought about softball. I mean, what are we getting down to, softball or Little League kind of roles? Or like you said, amateur. I thought it was ridiculous, Scott and Mark. I thought that they were just they're grasping for straws, and I know they're trying to watch the timing so teams can get out of town if they have to play a doubleheader. I get all that, but you're just making a mockery of the sport of baseball. I'm sorry, Major League Baseball.
Thank you.
Well, don't feel sorry about it, George. Tigers and the Reds had one yesterday to begin with, and that thing called complete games are a little easier when you have 7 innings than you do at 9.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Mark, does that devalue a complete game at 7 innings? Would you say?
How about instead of an asterisk, how about an asinine game?
There you go. That's funny. So, Mark, I've got to ask you, does a 7-inning complete game devalue complete games, even though complete games are actually extinct to begin with, unless you're Roy Halladay?
Exactly.
What do you say?
Right, yeah.
It does devalue it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's play the speed-up rules with the California rule with the guy on second. That's called the California rule, by the way, because I saw that started in around 2011 when I was out in Arizona. And I said, what in the hell are they doing with a guy on second? Oh, well, we have to play the speed-up game here to see who's going to be a winner because, there's 50 teams here and they're paying for all these wonderful fields, and we have to get off the field, so we have to speed this rascal up. And so they call it the California rule, and it's the exact same rule that they're doing right now with Major League Baseball.
Oh, my goodness.
It's called the California rule, by the way.
Yeah.
California rule.
Interesting, Mark.
So let's go. All right, so now that you guys are on together.
The whole season is going to end up being an asterisk. And make that far to the playoffs and World Series.
Well, I've asked this question to a lot of people, so now Mark and George get a crack at it, although Mark's already probably answered it 10 times over. If we have a perfect game, okay, going into the 10th inning, we wonder, let's go ahead and evaluate what a perfect game is. Does the pitcher lose the perfect game because of that California rule as you talk about, Mark?
Well, I tell you what, I don't know what they would do. I mean, I'm sure these guys are going to be scratching their heads because I don't know if this is far-sighted analytics or what you're going to call it. You're stepping into a whole different, woodpile here. You really are. And I don't know what they're going to call it. Who knows? I mean, it's kind of like the ruling the other day. Here, you got Kelly out there, and he doesn't hit the guy, the third baseman, and so he throws it behind him, and so he gets the next guy out, and he turns to him and basically says something, bitch, and he keeps walking to the dugout, so the second baseman, what's his name, goes, continues over. So the team kind of mingles over and they kind of, poo-poo. And all of a sudden, this guy gets an 8-game suspension for calling somebody a bitch. Are you kidding me? That's normal shit for me. So, I mean, sit down, baby. I don't actually even say that, but good grief, 8 games? Are you kidding me? Now, I want to know who made that decision. I mean, they usually have a guy that's in charge of that, but I don't know who's flipping coins up there right now. But how they came to 8 games, I'll never knew.
So now that you brought up Joe Kelly, Mark, were the umpires really looking the other way when Joe Kelly decided to go ahead and play that game called beanball and doing everybody on the planet a favor? Only Joe Kelly was on the wrong end of it when he was with the Boston Red Sox. And, of course, the Dodgers were victimized by it. So you got to wonder, and Mark, you know it better than anybody, baseball has a tendency to police itself anyhow, okay? We all know that. So were the umpires looking the other way?
I don't know, but not anymore. Baseball doesn't police itself. It's some guy up at the top. If you look at somebody the wrong way, if you call them the bitch, you get an 8-game suspension. Are you kidding me? My gosh. 8-game suspension, that comes out to 21 games or a 162-game season.
Yeah, prorated.
If you rate it out, prorated.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess
getting back to that perfect game, I guess my feeling is that it's going to end up being Baseball Writers Association of America or Baseball Hall of Fame. Somebody's going to get involved with that and making that decision, but I can't see how it could be a perfect game if you allow the man at second base to obviously reach base at the top of the 10th inning or bottom of the 10th, and I feel to see how that could be a perfect game. But then again, who knows? The way things are going this year, anything goes.
Yeah, and
George, you're going to call it voodoo baseball.
Yeah.
Well, hey, George,
voodoo baseball.
Well, George just segued us to my next observation. The Field of Dreams game actually got canceled between the none other than the St. Louis Cardinals and the Chicago White Sox. My goodness, Field of Dreams.
Right.
Well, they canceled it. I had not heard that, Scott.
August 13th, gone. Yep.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, they really wanted the Yankees there to begin with.
National televised, that Iowa cornfield, obviously made famous by the Field of Dreams movie. That's bad.
Well, that's a bucket list item for me. Obviously not right away. Of course, if we're looking for vacation time later in the year and you're looking for a place not to go to COVID-19, maybe Iowa may not be such a bad place. I don't know if you can catch COVID-19 from corn, but the 2 C's, COVID and corn, would certainly make a pretty corny observation. Sorry, guys, I had to get that one out there. So
there you go. Yep. So that works.
So with that said, Mark and George, do you think that baseball really will make it till the end of the year?
I don't think so.
What about you, George?
I don't think so either.
I mean, with what's happening, I don't think so.
It's
hard.
So is Commissioner Rob Manfred in the twilight zone when he says he's not a quitter?
Is he really the man? Is he really the commissioner?
Yeah, right. Not according to Trevor Bauer, he's not. Trevor Bauer's lobbying for his job on social media.
Tony Clark and Mr. Manfred, arguing all the time, and I don't know if they have a contract yet. So who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's in the twilight zone. Not being a quitter is one thing, but there's perception, there's reality. So that leads us to another sport played in the fall called the NFL. Knowing that baseball is having their problems the way that it is, do you think the NFL can even pull off a season knowing you got a lot more players, like 80 or some, on top of each other? As baseball's struggling without a bubble, what does it make the NFL look like?
Well, you look at college football, even, is there going to be college football, which is big revenue for the major universities. But on the other hand, the major universities, and I do know this because I've talked to some administrators, not that I'm right or wrong on this, but they've lost 15 or 20% of their students in their on-campus type thing. They won't have the on-campus experience.
Right.
So, and then you've got the junior colleges that are going to lose anywhere from 20 to 40%, So the revenue right there is cut, and administration and teachers are going to be cut. So the very first thing to go in college sports is going to be actually college baseball.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
hate to say that, but that's the truth.
I just hope that they could get some sports underway in the colleges, but I got my doubts, as do a lot of people. I mean, today, again, we heard, even in Michigan here, numerous Michigan State athletes, student athletes have come down with it. Michigan, they don't tell you what sport, but Michigan announced today 6 or 7 of the University of Michigan athletes came down with it. I mean, this stuff is continuing, and I don't see any possibility of them resuming intercollegiate sports right now on any college level myself. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, right now the colleges have been reduced to conference schedules to take away the non-conference and all the great matchups there that are long gone, as Ernie Harwell would say. Got to have Eichorn on here with a long gone Ernie Harwell reference. Okay. Had to do that. Leave me wide open for, I'm sure Mark probably
knows. And of course, everybody in Detroit is shocked because now we got our number one highest paid quarterback in Detroit Lions history, and he's on the COVID-19 list, Matthew Stafford.
Right, that's
so. And T.J. Hawkinson and Galladay, their top receiver, their top tight end is on the list. Hey, listen, it's not looking good right now for the NFL. I agree, Scott and Mark. I mean, it's a situation that is very fluid, and I know they're putting on a big face right now, the commissioner and everything, Goodell, but I still think that the NFL is tedious at best right now. They've already canceled all 4 exhibition games, but no loss for some people I know.
Yeah, they did. Mm-hmm. Mark, did you ever have a good
exhibition season has been canceled? That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, did you ever have a good relationship with Ernie Harwell? Did you ever get to know him? George and I were really close with Ernie.
I spoke to him a couple times. He actually interviewed me once in down on the field before the game. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. I didn't know Ernie Harwell, but you know what? I knew about Ernie Harwell. I knew a voice. Man, what a voice he had.
Wasn't he? Yeah.
Very distinct voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Few people realize.
Georgia Peach. He's from Georgia. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Very few people will ever realize that Ernie Harwell caught the shot heard around the world, only he didn't get credit for the call. I think he was on TV and everything. He goes to the radio guy at the time, but Ernie Harwell wasn't one of those types of people out there that really clamored for a lot of the attention anyways. That's how unselfish he really, really was. But yeah, I mean, I know you, obviously we all know that Ernie is what it is. So I'm like you guys. I have my doubts that the NFL will pull it off. Now, on a positive note, though, I will say that I'm impressed with the fact that the NHL and the NBA look pretty good right now, the way they got their bubble situation. I read today that the NHL, after the first week, because they began their exhibition games carrying over into the playoffs now, that they still have 0 tests in the NHL north of the border. What are you thinking about that, Mark? Did you know that?
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, the NHL, they got it down. And the NBA actually impressed me a little bit, too, over the weekend, that you may have a few guys out of the bubble here and there. But you know what? So far, the early returns on the NBA appear to be pretty good outside of the, I realize they have a platform for which they're going to talk about the other stuff. I get it. But we're talking COVID-19 tests so far. The early returns actually look pretty good there. So, but,
Well, of course, there's bowling. Bowling's coming along pretty good, I guess, huh?
Hey, don't kid yourself.
The Pro Bowler store. Yeah. And don't forget golf. Golf, golf gets usually one or two guys a week drop out of golf.
What's the one, George? What's the one where they have the on the ice where they had the little broom?
Oh, curling?
Curling.
Yeah.
There you go. That's next. Yeah.
I really never understood curling any more than I understand cricket or Australian rules football or those other ones. And I've actually gotten used to cornhole, so I'm not really sure. I think you see cornhole a lot over at Cracker Barrel, so I've gotten a really good first-hand taste of what it's like over there. When I'm waiting for my fried apples, I just grab that cornhole and just heave that bean bag, and hopefully I can hit the target. So go figure. My goodness, all the things we come up here on the Sports Exchange come up with all that stuff. And I can't wait till we get to the Nutty Buddy because we're going to have 2 book promotions tonight. Any thing that you guys want to add to the broadcast to spice it up even more now that I got my Cracker Barrel fried apples and chicken dumplings and all that stuff into it as well? What do you want to ask Mark?
You covered a lot. The one thing when I was over in Australia, I know Aussie rules football. They had 3 different types of football over there. They had Aussie rules and they had rugby rule, and they had all kinds of football. But the interesting thing is, I asked those guys. I said, "You guys wear a cup when you guys get down there in that scrum?" They said, "Oh no, we just grab one, throw it out. Everybody, and you lose a couple players when you do that." And I thought, well, these guys, they don't even wear pads. They don't wear nothing. They just go for it out there. They're the real tough. They're the real tough guys. They really are. So.
Well, on a lighter note, Scott, I don't know if you remember this, but when I went to Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, in 1983 to preview the Winter Olympics, LW Sports Talk and the Detroit Monitor, I sat next to Peggy Fleming on a bus ride as we went to mountain. We went to one of the mountains to tour the site of the alpine skiing, and my busmate was none other than Peggy Fleming. Now, that was a big thrill of my sports broadcasting career, trust me.
Well, why don't you just take it a step further and tell Mark that you were over at the Miracle on Ice game, too, in the Lake Placid. I actually went to the 84 Olympics out in L.A. I bought tickets for a couple of events, but it's still nice to be a part of an Olympic Games anyhow. But go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and spit out the beans, George, about 1980. And then
1980. Yeah, I was there for Miracle on Ice when we beat the Soviet Union.
Oh, my.
My wife and I got tickets ahead of time as fans, and no idea what we were going to get. We requested a couple of hockey games. So we ordered a bunch of tickets for different events. We got them in the mail. Lo and behold, two of those tickets that we were holding was to that Friday night game that ended up being USA against Russia, or Soviet Union at the time. Right. We had our own little miracle on ice just getting those tickets and being part of a crowd of only about 10, 11,000, I think, in that small arena, Lake Placid. And obviously, Mark and Scott, that's the biggest sports thrill of my life, being in that arena and watching the USA. And the great Al Michaels called with the game with Kenny Dryden as his color analyst. Yeah, it was a great
Lucky you, George.
Wow.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, now that you brought up bowling on this broadcast, once upon a time, a guy by the name of George Eichorn was the editor of the Bowler's Digest.
Really?
You had to bring that up, Scott.
Oh, come on. Anytime. Yeah. Hey, listen, I got to make a confession. I once won a trophy in bowling here for most unusual form. So if you want to take that to the bank or whatever, go ahead and do it. I once had a story with Dennis Rodman years ago, and, I bumped into him over at West Bloomfield Lanes when the band boys were in their height here, and Dennis looked at my form, and I said, "Why don't we play a couple games, Dennis?" Sure, no problem. At that point, he didn't really kind of go out the deep end. He was normal at the time, and but he was one of my. I'll tell you though, you develop favorites, inside of the locker room. Dennis was my go-to guy. But anyways, I'm out there with his wife Annie and their daughter Alexa, and I beat him the first. He beat me the first game. I said double or nothing. If I win the second game, okay, then you pay for it. I said, by the way, Dennis, I hope your bowling game better than your free throw shooting. And we just laughed at each other because obviously free throw shooting wasn't his specialty, and nor did he really ever care. It's safe to say I won, and he paid the games, and we had a lot of fun talking about it. But what the heck, We're here. We can go out there and
heck, when I used to play at the old Cardinal Stadium, Bush number 2, Dick Weber, the Pro Bowler, the U.S. Bowling Hall of Fame was right across the street from the Cardinal Stadium, Bush Stadium.
Yes, I do know that it was down there, and that was Detroit really claimed the bowling capital of the world, but somehow St. Louis kind of wrestled that away from us and got that Bowling Hall of Fame before Detroit could. And I give your state and obviously St. Louis a lot of credit for doing that. But yeah, Dick Weber, what a fantastic career he had in bowling. Right. And the days with Earl Anthony and Mark Roth and all those guys. Yep. I'll never forget. That was the peak of bowling, as far as I'm concerned. Nelson Burton Jr. and Marshall Holman and all those guys. Dick Weber was one of them, but Earl Strampy, we had a guy named Bob Strampy from Detroit, who was one of the greatest bowlers of all time. And in fact, the funny story is, Mark and Scott, you know this, that the night we won that Olympic semifinal game, the Miracle on Ice, the show that I was getting phoning reports back to in Detroit, the ABC affiliate, WXYZ Radio, I would phone in reports, and the guy on the air of all sports was interviewing a bowler that night on his talk show. Bowling. He was talking bowling in the night of the Miracle on Ice, but his name is Ron Cameron, but at least he had the audacity, no, I shouldn't say that. At least he had the smarts to put me on. Remember, Scott, give phone-in reports from Lake Placid.
Oh, yeah. Well, I got to tell you one of my only Dodger Stadium story, and I have to redeem myself down the road. But in 1984 for the Olympics, I had Korea or South Korea against the United States, and I had a ticket at Dodger Stadium. My cousin Terry drops me off, and I'm looking for him outside. I didn't know anything about Dodger Stadium. and Mark will tell you, and George was actually at Dodger Stadium too, from what I understand, for your honeymoon. Is that right? Well, yeah. I've never got my tail ripped like I ever did with my cousin Terry. He says, Scott, you could have been killed. Your dad would have killed me. Instead of taking me for a nice meal out in L.A., I had to settle for McDonald's that night. I guess he said, this food is a whole lot better than what could have happened to you when you could have been killed out here, and I would have had to deal with your dad about it. It's safe to say my next return to Dodger Stadium, I'll know where I'm going, and since I'm working on building some good rapport out in L.A., that I will be a little bit more aggressive where I go. Terry, if you're listening upstairs, rest in peace for quite a while, but I promise you I won't make the same mistake, and I'm a whole lot more street sense and smart now than I was back when I was in 1984, and go figure, Terry, it was only like, do the math, 22 years old or whatever I was. I don't know what it was back then.
Chavez Ravine can be pretty tough.
Yeah. Well, my cousin Terry made sure I knew how tough it could be when I got rattled and rolled. So, and I'm telling you, and it's not like Tiger Stadium's in one of the better neighborhoods either. Although now that I'm on a roll with this story, I got to tell you another one. Then I'll let you guys promote your books or whatever you want to promote. I don't care. But I'll never forget the time when I saw the Tigers and the Minnesota Twins play in the playoffs, and I tried to buy a ticket outside. Well, as it turns out, I had my money taken, but thankfully, one of the owners of the Highland House named Gene Ryson and his future wife Diane were there, and I asked, Gene was like an uncle to me, so I called him Uncle Gene, I kind of had my money taken away from me, I got ripped off. So I think he loaned me like $40, and when I wanted to pay him back, he wouldn't take it. But I ended up buying another ticket from somebody really honest, and you know who I sat next to? Ready for this? Calvin Griffith of the Minnesota Twins, and we talked baseball. And I remember the whole conversation. I wrote it for the Detroit Monitor. Remember that, George?
Oh, I sure did, Scott.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? So we talk about some of the most interesting neighborhoods on the planet to get tickets. Not that Chicago Stadium was ever an easy one either. Although, Mark, I know
that's a toughie.
What's that?
That's a toughie.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. We can talk about the birds and the bees and the toughies and the toughies. With that said, okay, Mark, we'll talk about toughies and transition over to the Nutty Buddy and all your books, and then George can go ahead and talk about what he's doing. So we need to get on this tough thing, and Mark, this is your chance to tell George how tough your Nutty Buddy is. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, well, Nutty Buddy is a protective cop, and to me, it's the world's greatest because, one, it's I've actually won five awards, and I'm an idiot. And so I designed this thing, and it came out right, and I got lucky. It's anatomically correct. And if you don't believe me, you can go to YouTube or anything and pull up Nutty Buddy videos. You can see me take a shot right in the nads at 90 miles an hour. And so it's easy going. And I've been on a lot of shows with this thing, and I guess they like seeing me get hit in the nads. I have 5 sizes. The sizes are hammer, boss, hog, trophy, and of course Mongo. And every 8th grader wants Mongo, and of course the little guy with the little fingers, he has the hog when he goes up to check out with a pretty good looking checkout lady. And by the way, maybe I have the hog on right here, and I'm ready to go. I have 2 books. I have On the 8th Day God Made Baseball, and then the other one is called Country Boy Conveniently Wild. I'll have a 3rd book coming out called What's Up Ramrod. It's being formatted right now, and it's humor, baseball humor. Unfortunately, they're all true stories, and it's kind of a little bit enlightening in a sense, and I've enjoyed writing those books. So that's pretty much it.
Well, we love hearing about it every time you come on the broadcast, George. Since Mark gave you his books, why don't you talk to him about yours?
Yeah, my book is called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. Scott Morgenroth is featured in there with some great pictures of himself. and it covers our friends like Ernie Harwell and Van Patrick and George Kell and Bruce Martin and Bud Lynch, and all these great Detroit announcers are captured in photographs and small stories in my book, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air by Arcadia. And there's a link on the South Florida Tribune website, the About Me section, where it talks about myself. There's a link there that Scott and Candy put that can link you directly to order the book, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. And you can also reach me at DSBA2, at DSBA2, and also at Yahoo. I'm at Eichorn at yahoo.com. Thank you.
And by the way, Mark, when you look at George's book, I'm in there with Jimmy Connors and Muhammad Ali. Not bad people, are they? Okay. So,
hey, George Kell, is that the one from Arkansas? George Skeeter Kell?
Yep. Skeeter was his brother. George was the George is the Hall of Fame as a third baseman, and then he became the Detroit Tigers television voice.
Skeeter Kell had a sporting goods store in Kennett I used to always go to. I grew up in a little small town, and Kennett's not much bigger, but I always used to go to Skeeter Kell Sporting Goods, and I always knew he was from Arkansas, but he had a sports store there, and that's where I bought my goodies for high school. So there you go. Interesting.
Well, I encourage both you guys to connect on social media after the broadcast is over. With that said, you can get just so you know, you can listen to these broadcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. For those people that think I'm talking too fast, I'll say it again, and I hear it all the time anyhow. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. If you didn't get the first time, believe the charm, the second one will. Also, you can follow me at Twitter at Tribune South. That's the at Tribune, Tribune, South, all one. Facebook, South Florida Tribune. Instagram, South Florida Tribune. I have a YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune, that'll get going at some point or another when COVID-19 goes away, if it ever does, or I'll have to find myself in a remote area where all I have to do is yell at the alligators or whoever will listen to me anyway. So our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. Email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth as well. So you're listening to the Sports Exchange here. And again, you can also find these broadcasts on SouthFloridaTribune.com. Well, like I said, best meets the best here at having Mark Littell and George Eichorn, Sports Exchange past with George and I, Sports Exchange present with George and I, and Mark, who's been on the Sports Exchange numerous times with the different places for which we've had it. So, guys, I'm glad to have an opportunity to bring you on together, and I hope we have a chance to bring you guys on again sometime down the line. You guys are absolutely fantastic. It was great to bring up a lot of old nostalgia when we talk about the Lindell AC Tiger Stadium. Because obviously, Mark, you have a really good baseball history, being a pitcher for not only the Kansas City Royals, St. Louis Cardinals, and being the only guy that's ever played for both Missouri teams. You have a lot of great stuff, Mark, and I'm so proud that indeed you are, from my mind and my heart, you're my favorite guest, and I'm glad that George could be on here with us tonight. So anything y'all want to add before we wrap this puppy up?
Well, yeah, it has, George. I enjoyed it, George. A lot of good stuff. I'm looking forward to actually reading your book about the broadcast, actually. I was just sitting here thinking about it. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We should definitely do that. Get you and see yours as well. That'd be a great opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about each other, too. Wow. Thank you.
Well,
I'm going to close this thing out as a closer does, because you say throw peas at the knees, no pies in the eyes, no wall balls, and you'll be just fine.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm not closing it out. Mark Littell did. So on behalf of, well, should I say it? On behalf of Mark Littell, George Eichorn, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Manmouth. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead, Mark. You get the final word.
Rat-tat-tat, swing the frickin' bat. Let's go. There's my final word, swing the bat. Oh. I got jumped in field, so swing the bat, guys.